The newspapers called it the scandal of the decade, but for Duke Sebastian Caldwell, it was the moment his heart started beating again after 5 years of silence. It happened at the Grand Masquerade of 1893. Everyone was there to see the Duke announce his engagement to a woman he didn't love. But then, a mysterious figure in emerald silk stumbled near the orchestra pit. As she fell, Sebastian caught her, and when her mask slipped, the music didn't just stop. His world ended. Because the woman in his arms wasn't a stranger. She was the only woman he had ever loved, the one who supposedly died 5 years ago. The air inside the Dorchester ballroom was thick enough to choke a man, heavy with the scent of expensive French perfume, beeswax candles, and the underlying stench of desperate ambition. It was November 14th, 1893. Outside, London was being battered by a relentless sleet, but inside, the aristocracy pretended that cold, hunger, and misery were foreign concepts. Sebastian Caldwell, the 9th Duke of Ashbourne, stood near the velvet-draped entrance of the East Wing, swirling a glass of scotch he had no intention of drinking. At 32, Sebastian was the most coveted bachelor in England. He was tall, with the kind of sharp, brooding features that inspired bad poetry in debutantes' diaries, but his eyes, a piercing, icy blue, were dead. They had been dead for a very long time. "You look like you're attending a funeral, Sebastian," a voice drawled beside him. It was Lord Arthur Pendleton, his oldest friend, and perhaps the only man in London who knew the truth about the Duke's temper. "A funeral would be preferable," Sebastian replied, his voice a low rumble. "At a funeral, one isn't expected to dance." "Careful," Arthur warned, nodding toward the center of the room. "Lady Beatrice is watching. She has the eyes of a hawk and the claws to match." Sebastian didn't look. He knew Beatrice willed him to. She was beautiful, in the way a diamond is beautiful. Cold, hard, and expensive. Their engagement was to be announced at midnight. It was a merger, not a marriage. Her father's shipping empire for Sebastian's ancestral titles. It was sensible. It was logical. It was hell. The orchestra struck up a waltz, the violins screeching slightly in the humidity. The sea of masks began to swirl. Venetian beaks, feathered dominoes, gilded grotesques. Sebastian hated masquerades. They were lies upon lies. He turned to leave, intending to hide in the library until the announcement, when a flash of color caught his peripheral vision. Emerald green. It wasn't a common color for the season. Most women wore pastels or deep crimsons. But this figure, standing alone, near a marble pillar, was draped in dark, shimmering emerald silk that clung to a frame too thin to be fashionable. She wore no jewelry, only a simple black ribbon around her throat. Her mask was plain black velvet, covering the upper half of her face. Sebastian froze. His heart gave a painful, singular thud against his ribs. It wasn't the dress. It was the way she stood. She held her hands clasped tightly in front of her, her head tilted slightly to the left as if listening to a song no one else could hear. Lydia. The name screamed in his mind, loud and violent. But Lydia was dead. He had seen the grave in Cornwall. He had paid for the headstone himself. Lydia Rosewood, beloved daughter. 1888. "Sebastian?" Arthur asked, concerned. "You've gone pale." Sebastian ignored him. He took a step forward, then another. The crowd seemed to part around him, the noise of the chatter fading into a dull buzz. He moved like a predator stalking a ghost. The woman in green swayed. It was subtle at first, just a slight tremble in her shoulders. She reached out, her gloved hand grasping for the cold marble of the pillar. She missed. As her knees buckled, Sebastian broke into a run, abandoning all ducal dignity. He shoved past a startled general and a screeching dowager. He reached her a split second before she hit the parquet floor. He caught her hard against his chest, the momentum nearly knocking them both over. She was light, terrifyingly light. Her head lolled back against his arm. exposing the pale, graceful curve of her neck. "Madam," he barked, panic rising in his throat, "can you hear me?" She didn't answer. Her breathing was shallow, ragged. With a trembling hand, Sebastian reached down to check her pulse at her neck, but as his fingers brushed her skin, he knocked the ribbon of her mask. The velvet slid away, falling to the floor. The ballroom went silent. Or perhaps Sebastian just went deaf. The face staring up at him, pale as moonlight and etched with exhaustion, was unmistakable. There was a small scar on her chin from a childhood fall. Her eyelashes were long and dark against her cheeks. It was Lydia, not a ghost, not a hallucination. Lydia, alive. In his arms. "My God," Sebastian whispered, the Scotch glass slipping from his other hand and shattering on the floor. "Lydia?" The crowd closed in, murmuring, buzzing with scandalous delight. Lady Beatrice pushed through the throng, her face twisted in fury. "Sebastian," she hissed, "what are you doing? Who is this creature?" Sebastian looked up, his blue eyes blazing with a ferocity that made Beatrice take a step back. "Get a doctor," he roared, his voice shaking the crystal chandeliers. "Get a doctor now, or I will burn this building to the ground." He scooped the woman up into his arms, holding her as if she were made of glass, and stormed towards the exit, leaving his fiancée, his reputation, and his entire life behind him in the ballroom. Sebastian kicked open the door to the private study in the east wing, startling a footman who was dozing by the fire. "Out!" Sebastian commanded. "Fetch hot water, brandy, and Dr. Sterling. Tell him it is a matter of life and death." The footman scrambled away. Sebastian laid Lydia gently onto the leather Chesterfield sofa. Up close, under the harsh light of the gas lamps, she looked devastatingly ill. Her skin was translucent. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath her eyes, and her lips were cracked. He knelt beside her, stripping off his heavy dress coat and covering her shivering frame. He took her hand, her left hand. It was rough, calloused, the hand of a worker, not a lady. "Lydia," he murmured, pressing her cold fingers to his lips. "Open your eyes, please." His mind raced back 5 years, to Cornwall, 1888. He hadn't been a duke then. He was just Lord Sebastian, the rebellious second son sent to the coast to manage his father's estate and stay out of trouble. He had met Lydia Rosewood in the village library. She was the daughter of the local schoolmaster, poor, proud, and brilliant. They had fallen in love with the reckless speed of youth. They spent their days walking the cliffs, and their nights writing letters they slid under each other's doors. They had planned to elope. He was willing to give up his title. She was willing to leave her home. And then the fire. He remembered the smell of smoke waking him in the night. The village inn where Lydia lived with her father had burned to the ground. By the time Sebastian got there, the roof had collapsed. The bodies were unidentifiable. His father, the old duke, had arrived the next morning, solemn and grim. He told Sebastian that Lydia was gone. He showed him the ring, a cheap silver band Sebastian had given her, found in the ashes. Sebastian had broken. He allowed his father to drag him back to London, allowed the grief to turn him into the cold, unfeeling statue he was today. But she was here. Lydia stirred. A low moan escaped her lips. Her eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes the color of warm honey, eyes that had haunted his dreams for 1,800 nights. She blinked, struggling to focus. When her gaze landed on Sebastian, she didn't smile. She flinched. She scrambled backward, pushing herself against the leather of the sofa, terror written on every feature. "No," she rasped, her voice dry and broken. "No, please, I didn't mean to come here. I didn't know it was your house." "Lydia, it's me," Sebastian said softly, raising his hands in surrender. "It's Sebastian. I know who you are, your grace." She spat the title like a curse. "Let me go. If Beatrice finds me here—" "Beatrice?" Sebastian frowned. "How do you know Beatrice?" Lydia laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "Everyone knows Lady Beatrice, the woman who bought the Duke." She tried to stand, but her legs gave way. Sebastian caught her again, settling her back down. "You are not going anywhere," he said firmly. "You are ill, and you are supposed to be dead. You have 5 years of explaining to do, Lydia." "I have nothing to explain to you," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "You made your choice, Sebastian. You chose the title. You chose the money. You sent the letter." Sebastian froze. "What letter?" Lydia reached into the bodice of her dress and pulled out a folded, yellowed piece of paper. It was worn thin, as if it had been read 1,000 times. She threw it at him. Sebastian unfolded it. The handwriting was impeccable. It was his handwriting, or a perfect forgery of it. "My dear Lydia, the summer has been amusing, but reality calls. I cannot marry a schoolmaster's daughter. It would be a stain upon my lineage. My father has offered you a sum of £500 to leave Cornwall and never speak my name again. Take it. Consider it payment for your services. Sebastian." The room spun. Sebastian stared at the paper, nausea rising in his gut. "I never wrote this," he whispered. "Lydia, I swear on my mother's grave, I never wrote this. Don't lie," she screamed, the energy draining her remaining strength. "I took the money. I had to. My father died in that fire. I was pregnant, Sebastian. I was alone, burned, and carrying your child. And you sent me a check to disappear." The world stopped. "Pregnant?" Sebastian's voice was barely audible. Lydia closed her eyes, tears streaming down her soot-stained cheeks. "Yes, and that is why I am here. Not for you. I would rather die than ask you for help. But our son is in trouble." Before Sebastian could process the seismic shift in his universe, he had a son, the door to the study burst open. It wasn't the doctor. It was Lady Beatrice, followed by her father, the imposing Lord Holloway, and 2 of the Duke's personal security guards. "So this is where you're hiding," Beatrice sneered, sweeping into the room in a cloud of expensive lace and fury. She looked at Lydia, who was huddled on the sofa, and curled her lip in disgust. And with a beggar, no less. "Really, Sebastian? On our engagement night?" "Get out," Sebastian said. He didn't shout. He didn't stand. He spoke with a quiet, lethal calm that was far more terrifying than his shouting. "I think not." Lord Holloway stepped forward, tapping his cane on the floor. "You have a contract, boy. My ships for your title. If you embarrass my daughter, your daughter," Sebastian stood up slowly, turning to face them, "is the least of my concerns. Beatrice, did you know?" "Know what?" Beatrice feigned innocence, but her eyes flickered toward Lydia with a spark of recognition. Sebastian caught it. He stepped closer to her. "You know her. You knew she was alive." Beatrice laughed nervously. "Don't be absurd. Who is she? Some laundry maid you tumbled in the hay?" "She is the future Duchess of Ashbourne," Sebastian said. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Lydia gasped behind him. "Sebastian, don't." "She is the mother of my son," Sebastian continued, his voice rising. "And if either of you speaks another word of disrespect toward her, I will ruin you. I don't care about the ships. I don't care about the debts. I will sell every painting, every acre of land, every silver spoon in this godforsaken estate before I let you touch her." Lord Holloway turned purple. "You possess nothing without my money. You are destitute, Caldwell, a pauper with a crown. Then I shall be a happy pauper," Sebastian snarled. "Guards, escort Lord Holloway and Lady Beatrice off the premises. If they resist, throw them out into the sleet." The guards hesitated, looking between the wealthy merchant and their master. "Now!" Sebastian roared. As the guards moved, Beatrice screamed, her mask of civility shattering. "You fool! You think you can just play happy family? You don't know what she's done. You don't know who owns her." Sebastian paused. "What does that mean?" Beatrice smiled, a cruel, twisted thing. "Ask her. Ask your precious Lydia why she was at the ball. She wasn't there to see you. She was there to steal. The door slammed shut, leaving them in silence again. Sebastian turned back to Lydia. She had gone even paler, if that was possible. She was gripping the emerald silk of her skirt so tightly her knuckles were white. "Lydia?" Sebastian asked gently. "What did she mean?" Lydia looked down, shame burning her neck. "She's right. I didn't come to find you. I came to steal the Star of India necklace from the Duchess's display case." Sebastian blinked. "Why?" "Because of Silas Vane," she whispered. The name sent a chill through the room. Silas Vane was the most notorious loan shark in London. He didn't just lend money. He owned souls. He ran the East End with a brutality that made the police look the other way. "He has him," Lydia sobbed, her composure finally breaking completely. "He has our son. He has Leo." "Leo," Sebastian tasted the name. "He has... Leo?" "I fell ill last winter," Lydia explained, the words tumbling out. "I couldn't work. I took a loan for medicine and food, £5. That was all. But Vane, he adds interest upon interest. Now he says I owe him 500. He took Leo 3 days ago. He said if I didn't bring him something of value from the Masquerade tonight, he would put Leo to work in the coal cellars. He's only 4 years old, Sebastian. He's small. He coughs in the cold." A dark shadow passed over Sebastian's face. It was a look that had terrified soldiers in the colonies and politicians in Parliament. It was the look of a man who had found a target for 5 years of repressed rage. He walked over to his desk and opened a drawer. He pulled out a heavy, black revolver and checked the cylinder. "Sebastian?" Lydia asked, fear in her voice. "What are you doing?" He shoved the gun into his waistband and grabbed his heavy coat. He walked back to the sofa, lifted Lydia into his arms again, and carried her towards the door. "Where are we going?" she cried. "We are going to the East End," Sebastian said, his voice cold as steel. "We are going to get our son. And then I am going to introduce Mr. Silas Vane to the concept of hard karma." The carriage ride from Mayfair to Whitechapel felt like a descent into the underworld. Sebastian had commandeered his own coachman, a stoic man named Barnaby, ordering him to drive faster than the slick, cobblestone streets should have allowed. Inside the carriage, the silence was suffocating. Lydia sat across from him, shivering violently, despite the heavy wool coat Sebastian had wrapped her in. She stared out the window as the gas lamps of the wealthy districts faded into the smoky, flickering oil lanterns of the East End. The air changed, growing thick with the smells of coal dust, open sewers, and unwashed bodies. Sebastian watched her. The rage that had propelled him out of his mansion was now mixing with a crushing agony. Every time she shivered, he saw the years he had missed. He saw the fire in Cornwall, the cheap grave he had wept over, and the lie that had stolen 5 years of their lives. "Lydia," he said, his voice rough. He reached across the carriage, intending to take her hand. She flinched back, pressing herself against the squabs. "Don't, please, Your Grace, don't pretend." The formality stung worse than a slap. "I am not pretending. And stop calling me that. I am Sebastian. I am the man who wanted to run away with you." "That man is dead," she said, turning her haunted golden eyes toward him. "He died when he sent me that letter. The man sitting here is a duke who is about to lose everything because of a mistake he made 5 years ago." "You were never a mistake," he insisted, the intensity of his gaze making her look away. "And that letter was a forgery. I don't know who did it. Perhaps my father before he died. But I swear to you, I never stopped loving you. When they told me you burned in that inn, part of me died right there with you." She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to. But 5 years of poverty, of scrubbing floors until her hands bled, of dodging landlords and predators like Silas Vane, had built a fortress around her heart. "It doesn't matter now," she whispered. "Only Leo matters." The carriage jolted to a halt in front of a dilapidated structure near the docks. A rusted sign creaked above the door. "The Black Anchor." It was a gin palace and a front for much darker trades. "Stay here with Barnaby," Sebastian ordered, checking the revolver at his waist again. "No." Lydia was already reaching for the door handle. "He is my son. I am coming." Sebastian saw the resolve in her jaw, the same stubborn streak that had drawn him to the schoolmaster's daughter years ago. He didn't argue. He stepped out into the freezing sleet, offering her his hand. She took it only for balance, dropping it the moment her feet touched the muck-covered pavement. He led her toward the entrance. A hulking brute stood guard at the door. He sneered as they approached, eyeing Sebastian's fine clothes. "Lost your way, governor? Slumming it tonight?" Sebastian didn't slow down. He didn't speak. He simply drove his fist into the man's throat with a sickening crunch. The guard collapsed, gagging. Lydia gasped, but Sebastian pushed her behind him, kicking the door open. The inside of the Black Anchor was smoky, hot, and reeked of cheap gin and desperation. Conversations died as patrons turned to stare at the intrusion. At a table in the far corner, illuminated by a single bright kerosene lamp, sat Silas Vane. Vane was a small man, oddly fastidious for his surroundings, dressed in a checkered suit that was too loud. He was counting a stack of coins, his rat-like face pinched in concentration. He looked up, and a slow, oily smile spread across his face when he saw Lydia. Then his eyes shifted to Sebastian, and the smile froze. He recognized the Duke. Everyone in London recognized the Duke. "Well, well," Vane stood slowly, sliding the coins into his pocket. "Mrs. Rosewood brought a friend, and a very shiny friend at that. Did you bring my necklace, my dear? Or did you bring me payment in another form?" Sebastian stepped forward, the crowd parting like the Red Sea before his palpable menace. "Where is the boy, Vane?" Vane chuckled nervously. "The boy is fine. He's collateral. Just business, Your Grace. Surely a man of commerce understands collateral." "I understand kidnapping," Sebastian said, his voice dangerously low. "I will ask you one more time. Where is my son?" Vane's eyes widened slightly. "Your son?" He looked quickly at Lydia, calculating. "Well, that changes the interest rates considerably, doesn't it?" Vane whistled sharply. Two large men stepped out from the shadows behind him, rolling up their sleeves. "I don't care who your ancestors were," Vane sneered, regaining his confidence. "Down here, the only royalty is currency. Get him, boys." The first man swung a heavy wooden chair. Sebastian ducked under it with a soldier's reflex, driving his shoulder into the man's midsection and sending him crashing into a table of dominoes. The second man pulled a knife. Lydia screamed. Sebastian didn't hesitate. He drew the revolver and fired a shot into the ceiling. The deafening boom stopped the room cold. Plaster rained down on the patrons, who began scrambling for the exits. Sebastian leveled the gun at Vane's head. "The boy, now!" Vane, pale and sweating, pointed toward a heavy oak door behind the bar. Sebastian grabbed Vane by his checkered collar, dragging him along as a human shield. He kicked open the door to a freezing, rat-infested storeroom. In the corner, curled up on a pile of filthy burlap sacks, was a small bundle. "Leo!" Lydia cried, rushing past Sebastian. The bundle stirred. A small, tousled head of dark hair lifted. Two enormous blue eyes, Sebastian's eyes, blinked in the sudden light. The boy was shivering, his clothes ragged, his face smudged with coal dust. "Mama!" Leo croaked, his voice raspy from coughing. Lydia scooped him up, burying her face in his neck, sobbing uncontrollably. Sebastian stared. It was like looking into a mirror from 30 years ago. The boy was undeniably his. The reality of it hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had a son. He turned back to Vane, who was cowering against a stack of barrels. The rage that surged through Sebastian now was murderous. He wanted to end this leech who had tormented his family. "If I ever see your face again," Sebastian pressed the warm barrel of the gun against Vane's forehead, "I won't shoot the ceiling." He shoved Vane away, then turned to his family. Lydia was holding Leo so tightly, it looked painful. "Let's go home," Sebastian said softly. Lydia looked up at him, over the head of their child. For the first time that night, there was no fight left in her eyes, only exhaustion and a flicker of desperate hope. The return to Ashbourne House was surreal. They entered through the servants' entrance to avoid any lingering guests or reporters. The vast mansion was silent, the party long over, the wreckage of the evening left for the morning staff. Sebastian led them to his private chambers, a wing of the house no one else entered. He ordered a stunned maid to prepare a bath and bring warm milk and food. Leo, exhausted and overwhelmed, clung to Lydia. Sebastian stood in the doorway of the bathroom, watching as Lydia gently washed the grime from their son's small body. The boy was too thin, his ribs showing prominently against his pale skin. Every bruise, every scratch on the child's body felt like an indictment of Sebastian himself. When Leo was clean, dressed in one of Sebastian's silk shirts that swallowed his tiny frame, and fed, he fell asleep almost instantly in the center of Sebastian's massive four-poster bed. Lydia sat on the edge of the bed, stroking the boy's damp hair. She looked utterly out of place in the opulent room, her emerald dress ruined, her face drawn with fatigue. Sebastian poured 2 glasses of brandy from a crystal decanter and brought one to her. She took it with trembling hands. "He has your eyes," she whispered, not looking up. "He has your chin," Sebastian replied, sitting in a velvet armchair opposite the bed. He couldn't stop staring at the sleeping child. "Lydia, how did you survive? The fire." "I wasn't in the inn when it started," she said dully, taking a sip of the burning liquid. "I was in the barn, sick with morning sickness. By the time I smelled smoke, the whole structure was gone. I tried to run in to find my father, and a beam fell. It burned my arm." She unconsciously rubbed her left forearm. "When I woke up in the village doctor's house days later, everyone said I was dead. They had already buried the bodies." She looked at him then, her gaze piercing. "Then your father arrived. He didn't see me. He just paid the doctor to keep quiet and left, and a week later that letter arrived with £50, not 500, 50. Sebastian set his glass down, his hands shaking. "My father. Of course." The old Duke had been a ruthless pragmatist. It made terrible, perfect sense. He had seized the opportunity of the fire to erase his son's mistake, paying off a village doctor to falsify a death and forging a letter to break Lydia's spirit so she wouldn't come looking for Sebastian. "I didn't know about the baby until a month later," Lydia continued. "By then, you were back in London, the grieving, unreachable lord. I used the £50 to get to London, thinking I could find you, explain. But I was robbed my first day here. I had nothing. I ended up in the workhouses. Then I found work as a seamstress. It wasn't enough when Leo got sick." Sebastian moved from the chair to kneel on the floor in front of her. He hesitated, then took her rough, scarred hands in his own smooth ones. "I have no words that can atone for this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I swear to you, Lydia, I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to both of you. You are staying here. You are safe now." Lydia pulled her hands away gently. "Safe? Sebastian, you heard Lord Halloway. You owe him a fortune. You made a public scene. By tomorrow morning, you will be the most hated man in London. You can't protect us. We are just going to drag you down further." "Let them hate me." Sebastian stood up, his resolve hardening. "I have spent 5 years being the perfect, hollow duke they wanted. I'm done. I have my son. I have you, if you'll have me." "It's not that simple," Lydia said sadly. "We live in different worlds now." "Then I will burn this world down and build a new one," he vowed. He didn't try to kiss her. He hadn't earned that yet. Instead, he grabbed a quilt and lay down on the chaise lounge near the bed, keeping watch over the only 2 people who mattered. He didn't sleep. As dawn broke, turning the grey London sky a bruised purple. He knew the peace inside this room was a fragile illusion. Outside the heavy curtains, the wolves were gathering. The glass fortress of his aristocratic life was about to shatter. The blow didn't fall the next morning, as Sebastian had anticipated. The universe, it seemed, wanted to let him marinate in his dread for a few hours longer. Ashbourne House felt different in the daylight. The grand corridors, usually echoing with the bustle of servants and the ghost of history, were suffocatingly silent. The staff moved like mourners at a wake, eyes averted, whispers dying the moment Sebastian entered a room. They knew. Servants always knew before the masters did. Sebastian spent the morning in his library, surrounded by the smell of old leather and impending doom. He was reviewing ledgers that confirmed his worst fears. The ink on the pages seemed to mock him. His liquid assets were practically non-existent. His vast land holdings, thousands of acres in Derbyshire and Kent, were heavily mortgaged, leveraged years ago to prop up the estate's failings during his 5 years of grief-stricken neglect. He had signed papers without reading them, too busy drinking himself into oblivion to care if he was signing away his birthright. And the holder of those notes? Lord Halloway. It was a masterstroke of financial entrapment. Halloway hadn't just wanted a title for his daughter. He had wanted insurance. He had bought Sebastian's debts piece by piece, quietly, like a spider weaving a web around a sleeping fly. At noon, the heavy oak doors of the library creaked open. "Visitors, Your Grace," the butler, Higgins, announced. The old man's face was ashen, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. He didn't need to say who it was. The fear in his eyes said enough. Lord Halloway marched in. He was not accompanied by his daughter this time. Beatrice was likely at home, perfecting her pose of the jilted, tragic victim for the society photographers. Instead, Halloway was flanked by 2 solemn-faced solicitors carrying thick briefcases, and a man in a bowler hat whose cheap suit and hard eyes marked him immediately as law enforcement. Sebastian stood behind his mahogany desk. He didn't offer seats. He didn't smooth his rumpled shirt. He simply placed his hands flat on the desk, feeling the cool wood beneath his palms, grounding himself. "To what do I owe this invasion?" Sebastian asked, his voice steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. Lord Halloway stopped in the center of the Persian rug, planting his silver-tipped cane with an authoritative thud. He looked around the library with a proprietary air, his gaze lingering on the Titian painting hanging above the fireplace, as if deciding where he might move it. "Justice Caldwell," Halloway spat the name, stripping it of its title. "We are here for justice. You defrauded my daughter. You entered into a solemn contract of marriage under false pretenses, extracting financial favors and social standing, all while harboring a mistress and a bastard child in secret." "They are my family," Sebastian corrected, his voice dropping an octave, cold enough to freeze the air in the room. "They are not secrets, and I suggest you watch your tone in my house." "Your house?" Halloway let out a bark of laughter that sounded like dry leaves scraping together. "You deluded boy. This hasn't been your house for 6 months. You just haven't been sober enough to notice." He gestured to the solicitors. One of them stepped forward, opening a briefcase and sliding a document across the desk. It was a foreclosure notice. "We are calling in the loans," Halloway said, his voice dripping with malicious satisfaction. "All of them. The mortgages on the Ashbourne estate, the liens on the London residence, the personal lines of credit. The total comes to £150,000. If you cannot pay by a close of business today, which we all know you cannot, we will begin the immediate seizure of assets." Sebastian looked down at the paper. The numbers were staggering. It was a death sentence for his lineage. "You can't do this in a day," Sebastian argued, his jaw tight. "There are procedures, grace periods. There are clauses," the solicitor droned in a monotone voice, "specifically pertaining to moral turpitude and public scandal. which allow for immediate acceleration of debt. Your performance at the Masquerade last night triggered every single one of them, Your Grace." Sebastian looked at Holloway. The older man was smiling. It was a reptile's smile, thin, cold, and predatory. "You planned this," Sebastian realized, the horror of it washing over him. "You knew I would react. You knew Lydia was alive before last night." "I merely know the value of leverage," Holloway smoothed his silk cravat, "and now I am collecting. You are destitute, Caldwell, a pauper with a coronet. You have nothing." "I have my son," Sebastian said, moving out from behind the desk, his physical presence looming over the smaller merchant. "And I have Lydia. As long as I have them, I haven't lost." Holloway's smile widened, revealing yellowed teeth. "Ah, I'm glad you mentioned the woman. Inspector?" The man in the bowler hat stepped forward. It was Chief Inspector Reed of Scotland Yard. Sebastian recognized him. They had once dined at the same club. Now, Reed looked at him with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. "My apologies, Your Grace," Reed said, tipping his hat slightly. "But Lord Holloway has sworn out a formal complaint of attempted grand larceny against a woman currently residing in your home, a Mrs. Lydia Rosewood." Sebastian's blood ran cold, the temperature in the room plummeting. "That is absurd. You cannot be serious." "Is it?" Holloway interjected smoothly. "We have a sworn witness, a Mr. Silas Vane. He claims Mrs. Rosewood owed him a significant sum and explicitly stated her intention to steal the Duchess's famous emerald necklace, the Star of India, at the ball to settle her debts. She even confessed as much to my daughter last night, in front of witnesses." Sebastian felt the trap close around his neck. Beatrice. She hadn't just been screaming in anger last night. She had been gathering ammunition. She had twisted Lydia's desperate admission into a criminal confession. "You are working with Silas Vane." Sebastian looked at Holloway with undisguised disgust. A peer of the realm consorting with an East End loan shark? A man who kidnaps children? "I am merely a concerned citizen assisting the law in apprehending a thief," Holloway said, examining his fingernails. "Mr. Vane is a businessman. His testimony is quite compelling. Inspector, do your duty. Arrest the woman." "Over my dead body," Sebastian snarled. He moved toward the door, intending to block it, to buy time, to do something, anything. "Sebastian, stop." The voice was soft, barely a whisper, yet it cut through the tension like a knife. Lydia stood in the doorway of the library. She had heard the commotion. She must have been listening from the hall. She had cleaned up as best she could, wearing a simple grey gown borrowed from a maid. It was ill-fitting, hanging loosely on her emaciated frame, but she wore it with the regal bearing of a queen. Her hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp, elegant lines of her face. She looked at Holloway, then at the police, and finally at Sebastian. There was no fear in her eyes, only a profound, heartbreaking sadness. "Don't make it worse," she said softly to Sebastian. "They want you to fight. They want you to add assault to your list of sins, so they can take you away too." "I won't let them take you," Sebastian's voice broke. He reached for her, gripping her shoulders. "Lydia, they are lying. We can fight this." "With what money?" she asked gently, reaching up to cup his face. Her hands were rough against his skin. "With what influence? You just lost everything, Sebastian. If you fight them now, you go to prison. And if you go to prison, who protects Leo?" The mention of his son was a physical blow. Sebastian froze. Leo. His small, coughing, fragile boy upstairs, sleeping in a bed that no longer belonged to them. "I am Lydia Rosewood," she said, turning to the inspector and extending her wrists. "I am ready." "No!" The scream tore from Sebastian's throat, raw and primal. He spun around, grabbing Holloway by the lapels of his expensive cashmere coat. He slammed the older man back against a bookshelf with enough force to knock several leather-bound volumes to the floor. "You snake!" Sebastian roared, shaking him. "You set this up. You knew about her. You knew about the fire. Unhand me." Halloway shrieked, his face turning purple, his feet scrabbling for purchase. "Inspector, help! He's killing me! Assault on a peer! Add it to the charges!" The solicitor scrambled backward, terrified. Inspector Reed and 2 constables who had been waiting in the hall rushed forward. They grabbed Sebastian, hauling him off the older man. Sebastian fought them. His military training kicked in, muscle memory from years in the regiment. He threw an elbow into a constable's ribs, hearing a satisfying grunt of pain. He was blinded by a red haze of rage, a fury that had been brewing for 5 agonizing years. He wanted to tear Halloway apart. He wanted to burn the world down. "Sebastian!" Lydia screamed, throwing herself into the fray. She grabbed his arm, her small hands clinging to his sleeve. "Stop! Please, think of our son. If you hurt him, they win. They take both of us." Her voice pierced the fog of his rage. "Think of our son." Sebastian went limp. The fight drained out of him instantly, leaving him panting, his shirt torn, his chest heaving. The constables pinned his arms behind his back, pressing his face against the side of a bookshelf. Halloway straightened his coat, wheezing, adjusting his collar with trembling hands. He glared at Sebastian with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You are lucky, Caldwell," Halloway hissed. "If I were a less generous man, you would be in irons right now. But I think I prefer leaving you free. Free to watch." He nodded to the inspector. "Take her." The inspector walked over to Lydia. She didn't resist. She didn't cry. She held her head high as the cold steel handcuffs clicked around her thin wrists. The sound echoed in the silent library like a gunshot. "Take care of him," she whispered to Sebastian, her golden eyes locking onto his blue ones. "Promise me, Sebastian. Don't let them win. Raise him to be better than this world." "I promise," Sebastian choked out, tears finally spilling over, hot and stinging. "I swear it, Lydia. I will fix this." "Goodbye, my love," she mouthed, and then they dragged her out. Sebastian watched helplessly as the love of his life was marched out of his library, flanked by men who weren't fit to polish her shoes. He listened to her footsteps fading down the marble hallway, followed by the heavy slam of the front door. Halloway lingered for a moment. He picked up his cane, tapping it against the leg of the desk. "You have until 6 p.m. to vacate the premises, Caldwell," he said coldly. "Leave the keys on the desk. And don't try to take anything of value. The inventory has already been logged. You walk out with the clothes on your back and that bastard brat of yours. Nothing else." Halloway turned and walked out, leaving the door open. Sebastian was released by the remaining constables, who backed away warily before leaving him alone in the wreckage of his life. He stood there for a long time, the silence of the house pressing in on him. He had failed. He had finally found her, miraculously, impossibly, only to let her be torn away again by the same greed and corruption that had separated them 5 years ago. He looked at the desk, the foreclosure notice, the empty space where she had stood. A scream built in his chest, a sound of pure agony. He walked over to the desk and picked up a heavy crystal paperweight, a gift from the Queen herself for his service in the Sudan. He weighed it in his hand. With a roar, he hurled it through the massive stained glass window that bore the Ashbourne family crest. Crash! The sound was deafening. Shards of coloured glass, red, blue, gold, rained down onto the driveway outside, shattering into 1,000,000 glittering pieces. The wind rushed in, cold and biting, carrying the scent of rain. It was a pathetic symphony for the end of the Dukes of Ashbourne. The glass fortress had fallen, but as the cold wind hit his face, Sebastian felt something else rising beneath the despair. It was a cold, hard resolve. They thought they had destroyed him. They thought that by taking his money, his title, and his woman, they had left him with nothing. But they were wrong. They had made a fatal error. They had left him with nothing to lose. And a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous man in the world. The next 3 days were a blur of nightmare. Sebastian moved Leo and a few meager belongings into a small rented room above a bakery in Cheapside, the only place he could afford with the cash he had in his pockets. The fall was absolute. The newspapers revelled in it. "The Duke of Debauchery," the headlines screamed. Ashbourne House was sealed by the creditors, its contents catalogued for auction. Beatrice gave interviews portraying herself as a tragic victim of a cruel deceiver. Sebastian spent his days hounding solicitors who wouldn't take his calls and visiting the prison where Lydia was being held on remand. The prison visits were brief and agonizing. They spoke through a wire mesh. Lydia looked sickly, the damp cold of the cells settling into her bones. "They are going to transport me, Sebastian," she told him on the third day, her voice devoid of hope. "Vane is testifying tomorrow. Holloway has paid the judge. It's over." "It is not over." Sebastian gripped the mesh until his fingers bled. "I will get the money. I will sell my commission. I will—" "You can't save me this time," she interrupted gently. "Save Leo. Take him away from London. Teach him to be better than this world." Sebastian left the prison consumed by a cold, clarifying fury. He had played by their rules his whole life. He had been honourable, and it had gotten him nothing but ash. He needed leverage. He needed to fight dirty. That night, instead of returning to the room where Leo was being watched by the baker's wife, Sebastian went back to the East End. He went back to the Black Anchor. The brute at the door recognized him and wisely stepped aside. The bar was quieter tonight. Silas Vane was at his usual table, looking smug. He was drinking champagne, no doubt purchased with Holloway's bribe money. Sebastian sat down opposite him. He didn't have a gun this time. He didn't need one. "Come to beg, Your Grace?" Vane smirked. "I've come to trade," Sebastian said quietly. "You have nothing to trade." "I know Holloway is paying you to testify against Lydia," Sebastian said, "and I know that's not the only business you do with him." Vane's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Duke. That sounds like slander." "During the few hours I was allowed back in my house to pack, I didn't just pack clothes," Sebastian lied. "It was a desperate gamble. I went through my father's old private safes. I found diaries, ledgers. He leaned in close. Holloway made his fortune shipping opium during the wars. He used my father's ships to do it without him knowing. When my father found out, Holloway paid him off. That's how the debt started. It wasn't a loan. It was blackmail money. My father was paying him to keep the family name clean." Vane stared at him. He didn't know if it was true, but it sounded plausible. Holloway was certainly ruthless enough. "And now," Sebastian continued, making it up as he went along, weaving a tapestry of lies based on the intuition of desperation, "Holloway is using you to launder the remaining profits from that trade in the East End. Isn't that right, Silas?" Vane's silence was volumes. Sebastian had hit a nerve. He didn't know the specifics, but he knew men like Holloway didn't associate with men like Vane unless it was mutually profitable and highly illegal. "If Lydia goes to prison tomorrow," Sebastian said, his voice hard as diamonds, "I take those ledgers to the Times. I take them to the Home Office. Holloway will hang for treason. And you, Silas? You'll just hang." Vane licked his dry lips. "You're bluffing. If you had those proofs, you would have used them to save your house." "The house means nothing to me," Sebastian said with total sincerity. "The title means nothing. Only she matters. You have until dawn, Vane. Either you disappear and forget to show up at court, or we all burn together." Sebastian stood up and walked out, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had nothing. No ledgers, no proof. Just the absolute certainty of Holloway's corruption. He waited outside the court the next morning. The air was crisp and cold. Holloway arrived in his carriage, looking triumphant. 10 o'clock came. The case was called. Silas Vane did not appear. The prosecutor, flustered, asked for a recess. By noon, whispers began to circulate. Vane was gone. His rooms were empty. He had taken Holloway's bribe money and run for the continent. Fearing the wrath of a duke with nothing left to lose, without the key witness, and with Sebastian's solicitors finally growing a spine, and arguing that the confession to Beatrice was hearsay from a hostile party, the case against Lydia crumbled. By 3 p.m., the charges were dismissed due to lack of evidence. Sebastian stood outside the Old Bailey doors as Lydia walked out a free woman. She blinked against the harsh afternoon sun, looking thin and fragile, but unbroken. They didn't run to each other. They walked slowly until they were face to face on the busy pavement. "You did it," she whispered. "How?" "I lied," Sebastian said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I learned from the best. I learned from you." He took her hand, ignoring the stares of passers-by, who recognized them from the scandal sheets. "Holloway still has the house," Lydia reminded him. "We have nothing, Sebastian. You are ruined." Sebastian looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the strength that had kept their son alive in the slums. He saw the love that 5 years of pain hadn't been able to kill. "I have my son," Sebastian said, kissing her scarred knuckles. "And I have the woman I never stopped loving. I am the richest man in England." He led her toward Cheapside, towards the small room above the bakery where their son was waiting. 2 days later, they left London on a train bound for the north. Sebastian had sold his mother's ruby ring, the one thing he had managed to hide from the creditors, to buy passage and a small cottage in the Lake District. It wasn't a castle. It had draughty windows and a small garden filled with weeds. But that evening, as the sun set over the hills, Sebastian watched Lydia laughing as Leo chased a stray cat through the long grass. He walked out to them, dropping to one knee in the dirt, not caring about his trousers. He took Lydia's hand, pulling from his pocket not a diamond of the first water, but a simple tarnished silver band, the original engagement ring he had found in her meagre belongings at the bakery. "Lydia Rosewood," the former Duke of Ashbourne said, his voice thick with emotion. "Will you marry me? Properly this time. For richer, for poorer. And I promise, it will mostly be for poorer." Lydia looked around at the small cottage, then down at her dirty son, and finally into the blue eyes of the man who had gone to hell and back for her. She smiled, and it was the first truly happy smile he had seen on her face in half a decade. "Yes, Sebastian," she whispered, pulling him to his feet and kissing him as the sun dipped below the horizon. "Yes." What a journey. From the glittering ballrooms of Mayfair to the dark alleys of the East End, Sebastian and Lydia's love story proves that true wealth has nothing to do with titles or gold. They lost a kingdom, but gained a world. If your heart was racing during that final confrontation with Vane, or if you shed a tear when Sebastian finally met little Leo, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new historical romance saga. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Sebastian did the right thing by bluffing Holloway? Or was it too risky? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep the romance alive.